Uh, so, uh, so Fox, we have very next session on the topic why do we need a design system. So the session will be taken by Ashok Vishwakarma. So I'll tell you about the our speaker. So Ashok Vishwakarma is the organizer of It's All About Web community. He is a Google developer expert. He's a writer at Medium. He writes a lot of blogs. He's a principal architect at Naukri.com, and then he's an entrepreneur. So, uh, so the topic will be about having a design system in place acts as a savior. It closes a gap between the designer and a UI engineer who works on a multiple products and often recreate or duplicate work done by other team. So he's going to talk about the design systems, why do we need that, and how it solves the gap between the designers and the UI engineers. So we'll be having him shortly now, and he'll be taking up the session. Yeah.
Hey everyone. So
Hi.
a little disclaimer over here. My camera was working till yesterday. I don't know what happens today, and today I'm not able to get the video out of it. So it would be something like this. I'll be sharing my screen, showing you the slides and all those specific aspects to it, and then I'll be talking through this nice avatar of me, which you can either keep it there or hide it, depending on how you plan to have it. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, and thanks, Tane, for introducing and having that quite nice description about me. I thought there is a little more to it. I'll come to that. So okay, so the topic here today is why do you need a design system? And the idea behind this is that when I had joined a company called Naukri like 2.5 years back, there are multiple teams, and when you scale that particular team into multiple products, the scenario started to happen that your changes started to happen in multiple directions, and then keeping track all those specific changes at one place is very difficult. And everybody was designing the system, designing the UIs as per their requirement. Every product has some sort of design people who help them on a designing their specific aspect to it. And that created a chaos internally, that every screen we sip have a lot of inconsistencies. And that what which I wanted to solve initially, and that's I needed to have a little bit of a process, a little bit of ideation around that to be done inside the organization. So this is based on that specific case study I've done over there and the learnings I have got from it. Okay, so the agenda here is to pretty much get you an understanding of what a design system is, uh, why I think that you need one, and how you can pretty much judge yourself that if you are needing those specific challenges to be solved, how a design system can help in that. So this would be more like of a benefits of having a design system in your organization, and then how you should get started, what sort of challenges you face when you get started, and how you can tackle them. And while doing all those specific design system related stuff in Naukri specifically, there are a lot of things which I have learned, and those I'll be sharing you as in key points to remember. But before that, as Tanay mentioned, that I'm a Google developer expert for web technologies. I was a principal architect at Naukri, and now I left that company for it's been around 2 months, and I'm currently a VP engineering in Dhani, and that's where I'm pretty much working on. And I happens to write a lot on Medium, so you can go and check my blog over there. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, the handles is there. Just remember that underscore over there. I also set up a design website for me specifically, and that is on design.asok.pro. So design is something which I like to do as in hobby, and most of the time I do designs specifically for my friends, specifically for some other specific clients which are not part of my current role. But in a specific day-to-day life, mostly I'm engaged in building UI and building software solutions, and which involves front end and back end both. But design is something which I think is more closer to me, and that's why I pretty much study and go through a little bit deeper and try to solve those challenges over there. So first thing first, so chapter one, what is a design system? And I found a very good quote. I don't remember that where I exactly read it, but this is which is stuck in my mind when I talk about design system and think about it. So it's a system of collection of reusable components, or maybe specific standards, which is guided by a very clear and concise uh, uh, instructions that can be assembled together and build any number of applications, UI, or standards all along. So the idea here is that before getting into the actual design, or before getting into the actual product, what you should do is you should pretty much do a research and try to figure it out, that what sort of components you'll be needing, what sort of a standard you'll be needing, and how you can pretty much compile and assemble those specific things to build your application or product. So when we talk about design system in general, there are a lot of things in play. You need to think about design language. You need to think about how your visual language is supposed to be. You need to also build a pattern library which designers and developer both can use. You also need to talk through your marketing people to set up a content style guide, where that how your brand uh, voice and tone gonna be, how you're gonna write your uh, marketing emails, how you're gonna pretty much send emails within the team, and all those specific things gonna come into the content style guide. Then you have a brand guidelines, which tells third parties or maybe internal customers that how the brand's supposed to be used, what are the logos, what are the formats of logos available, and which formats you should be really care about, and you should be what a kind of modification you can do over there, and how the color scheme and everything works. Later on, the most important thing here is the style guide, which is given by a design team to a front end engineering team, just to understand that how this product gonna look visually into a single screen, what sort of elements and attributes we have over there, and how we can get started with those specific elements. So I'll skip all those other things from the picture, and we'll talk about style guide and pattern library here in this talk, because that's what I was focused when I was starting my journey of the design system. So before we get into this, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about atomic design. There is a book written by Brad Frost, and he also writes an article about it, and it's a very good understanding that how you can pick a very small thing and then scale it into a bigger aspect to it. So he defines that atoms are which is the very least and the smallest entity you can find into one specific particular screen, and then you can combine these atoms and make molecules. Those molecules would be something where you can have uh, m- multiple combination and multiple variations of atoms which you have already created. And then using these molecules, you can define organism. This organism is something which is more living. A molecule can be living, but not that much complexity. But organism, it's something where you involve complexity, where you involve certain other things, and then they are pretty much built throughout the atom only. Then using those organism, you define templates, that how your individual screen or individual section of the UI gonna look like. And then using those templates, you create the pages, and in mobile you call them screens. So this is the aspect where Brad Frost pretty much talk about that, how you should think about this particular way, and think about your individual page, individual template, and divide them into very smaller modules which call atoms, and then work upon those atoms to style them and to pretty much correct them the way you want, and then scale up to, to actually the pages you want to build. And if we talk about style guide a little bit, the style guide is consists of four or five things. The first thing is which is very important is the core of it. That's called the way your spacing is defined, the way your grids, margin, and padding works, shadows and elevation. That how and how much shadows and how much elevation gonna be on each and individual individual block or a individual element. Then you have border radiuses, that how much curves you want and how much like the corner radius you need to have. The second thing, which is most important, is color. That how many colors your whole application gonna be, how many colors of your how many colors and shades of those colors would be available for you to use of upon. And mostly when we divide these colors, we talk about primary, accent, info, error, success, warning, and some specific color for theming. There are neutral colors which we use specifically for typography and some shadow and highlight stuff. But color in general in a style guide helps you to pretty much think through and understand every specific color you have used in your specific design, and then uh, take them and put them into a SAS variable or wherever you have started working upon. The next thing in the style guide which we have is typography. The typography gonna tells you that what the font families are you using and how these font families and font sizes and font weight you can combine and create and generate the text styles which we have used inside the designs. So these text styles could be the way your heading looks, the way your body content looks, the way your label and button text looks, and stuff around that. Ultimately, we have a library of components. So before your designers could go and start building one individual page, uh, actually what they internally do is this: they create this sort of component, that how the button gonna looks, what kind of behavior and what kind of variations that those buttons gonna have when somebody when a button is idle, how it's supposed to look when you hover on it, when you press on it, when you make it them disable, how those buttons gonna look, and how many types of button we'll be using inside our application. And similarly, it's not for button only, it's going to be for your icons there, it's going to be for your individual form elements, it's going to go for individual avatar blocks and stuff like that. So mostly in this section of style guide, what we find is we find the atomic components, the components which designers used to design very first. Those components we call the atomic ones, and those components we call atom, as Brass first pretty much mentioned in his book. And if we compare these atoms to a very popular library called Material Design, so these are the buttons which we have buttons, and these are the avatars. Then they have the icon buttons, they have the radio buttons, and then they have these checkboxes, font styles. This collection of these specific individual styles, we can call them atoms. Then we use that atom and define molecules. So molecules are pretty much more of a little bit complex things compared to atom, but they don't have that much complexity. They will be self-contained, they will take some property and pretty much work upon that. They don't have those kind of like tear down deep linking dependencies with each other, but they work individually and they can pretty much work like an atom, but having a combination of it. So your input boxes, your top header, your navigation bar, your buttons with have two specific styles. Like one is your icons, and then your is pan, and then shadows and stuff like that. When you combine all these, you end up having molecules. Then uh, the organism is something which is a little bit scalar version of molecules, where you have multiple molecules working together to form one particular objective. And that objective is here, which you see that this panel which you have shown here have a headline, a body text, an image, some specific content, two specific buttons, and a share bar. So the idea of creating all this is possible by using those atoms and those molecules which we have created earlier. And similarly, on the right side, you see there's a list item which have subtitle and some text, and there's an overline, there is icon, there image, and all those specific way of pretty much maintaining and displaying those specific things. So because this is different from the molecules, because this have more complexity compared to the molecules, and these have a little bit of state to it, like they can pretty much talk to each other and define and change their behavior based on one changes, and that's where the organism comes into the picture. By using these organisms, we can pretty much create templates, and these are how your first page is going to look, how your second page looks, and how your gallery is supposed to look, and stuff like that. So these are not actual screens, but these are the mock-ups, which we call in terms of design. And these mock-ups refer as templates, and using these templates we'll be creating page when we replace them with the actual UI elements which we have designed or developed. So this is so far the concept of atomic design and concept of breaking out your individual screens into multiple parts, working on the very smaller entity first, and then scale it up to build the whole UI. And this all things leads to develop this pattern library, which we are going to use internally to develop our product. So the idea is not only create this pattern library for front-end devs, but also create a pattern library for designers as well. That I'll discuss a little bit more into the later sections. But this whole atomic design and this whole idea of making a visual design language which consists of style guide and pattern library, it's to have an understanding from multiple teams and from various stakeholders, just to develop this pattern library internally, so that you can reuse them when you start building your application. So the chapter 2 is why you need one. And this question is pretty much where I needed to get a lot of answers internally when I've started this one. And by looking at those specific discussion which I did, and those specific measurements and challenges which I face, I come up with some sort of data points to it. The one is it reduces cost, and how it's do it is that, because as I mentioned earlier, that when you talk about larger team, when you talk about multiple products happening at one time, your changes are divided into multiple directions, and that's where you have very less communication with each other, and that's where you end up having lots of duplicate work by multiple teams. So when you have a design system, what it does is it's pretty much ask every specific team individuals or every specific team to go and look on that particular repository for any specific thing they have received from the designers. And if it's not available there, they either gonna develop it on their particular product and then publish it there. So next time somebody else have the similar component, they're gonna pick it from there instead of putting an effort to develop it completely from them. A typical conversation when we talk about the scale of a team happens in this way. When you have so here the dots are the people in the team, and the lines connecting them is the way communication can happen, the communication points. So as you see here, if you are just 3 people in your team, the communication is very easy. It's just one-to-one relationship over here. But as soon as you scale it to 4, you added two extra connection points and two extra communication points inside your team. And similarly, if you go to 10, suppose your team size is 10, there would be 45 communication stream needed, or 45 communication lines needed, so that people can come to one specific plane. So the idea here is that as soon as your team grows, the communication started to happen a little bit complex manner, and that's where we lose a lot of information, while because like there are lots of studies happens where if you start communicating in a larger team, things started to lose out. You start with something else, and you end up having something completely different. So smaller team may not have that much benefit with having a design system, because they don't have this specific challenge of rework, because the communication between them is fairly easy. But when you scale that team into a lots of team member, or into a lot and lots of team currently working inside the one particular product, or maybe multiple product you are shipping out, that time I think you need a design system just to cater those challenges. And the second thing it does is it's also increase confidence within the team. So a clear guideline on how to build a specific UI. If you already know that particular part when you start with your product, uh, you are not going to end up having a lot of communication with other stakeholders like marketing people, business people, or product people, and those communication comes as in not very straightforward or most of the time. So rather than going and waiting and talking to these people, you're going to look through the design system and pretty much figure it out that okay, this is a guideline which is maintained and managed by these all people, and they are all in agreement. So I'm very confident to understanding it, and I'm very confident to pretty much work upon it. So the idea here is that when you have that guideline available, and how the UI is supposed to build and how the UI is supposed to happen, your team feel a little bit more confident building those specific UI part. And this is a image which I like a lot. It's designed to pretty much have you get you an understanding that how a senior and junior developer pretty much go around when they talk about to getting started and finishing one aspect to it. But I think it's also very fit here when we talk about communication between two people on one particular aspect to it. When you go and you have multiple stakeholders for one specific guideline or one specific product, your communication is not going to be straightforward. It's going to be into these jaggy waves and jaggy paths where you come onto one place, they redirect to a different place, and then so and so on. So on a paper it looks like that communication is a very straight line, but internally when you're actually going to do that, you find out that there are a lot of stakeholders, there are a lot of people involved into this, and that's why. And these time is pretty much not considered when we estimate stuff, and when we pretty much give the timelines and all those specific things. uh, Design system also helps you to elevate empathy. So when everyone in your team contributes to that particular core design which you have initiated or started, and which everybody is pretty much built upon, it elevates the empathy between the teams. They try to understand more about other side of the story. They try to more into looking at and making that particular core design as successful as possible. So understanding someone's else side of picture, and understanding someone else size of background helps us to pretty much become more of a understand understanding here, where I can where we can pretty much go into those specific requirements and gather the information the way we want, and then put them and pretty much help them to contribute into the core design. So it elevates the empathy within the team if you have big one. It also helps you to define principles. So because when you do the design system, when you create the design system, all you do, you define principles, that how your button supposed to look across the product, how your text supposed to vary from one style to another, how your shadow is going to be, how your color is gonna be, and all those specific things are pretty much defined principle, which you not only define by yourself, but it's also defined by designers, developers, some marketing people, and some product manager. So all of these, when you design those specific principles, will be an agreement, and it's gonna help them to create their side of the to actually make their side of the job easy, and also your side of the job easy. It also improves consistency, because the source of truth for your design needs gonna be at one place, and everybody will be either taking it from there, or maybe contributing it to there. So when you develop product after having a design system, you see that every specific product you ship looks some way similar, and some way you can relate that they are coming from one specific brand. And that's why the companies who have multiple products under their umbrella, they tend to have a design system just to make the visually appeal, that visual brand appeal inside their product, so that while looking at one particular product and another, you can pretty much assume or pretty much and understand they came from one single source of design system. That's all about the learning which I had while initiated and thinking about that how I can put into a picture that why do we need a design system, and how we can pretty much think about it, and what's sort of challenges it solves for us. And the next chapter, which is chapter 3, that how you should get started about it. So the first thing which I think you should do is that you should involve everybody in your very specific decision making mechanism when you talk about design system, because every specific team member or a specific team in your company will have their own specific need, and to understand their own specific need and to ideate from there, it will solve a lots of problem, not for you only but for the stakeholders which is going to be part of your design system as well. What are the teams which is important, which I think when I have pretty much started my journey I found important, is this was the core team of starting to think about the design system and pretty much start to build on top of it. So the first thing which I talk to is the UX designers, that what kind of challenges they are facing at there, and how they are having those specific issues where they need to be creative, but there are some implementation challenges they are facing, and how we can minimize that gap as much as possible. We talk about motion designers to help us out with animations, that how they want the animation supposed to do they need anything from us which make their life a little bit easy. Similarly with the product manager, visual designers, business people, which is internally the marketing people. I would say, I mean, we don't really that much go and connect to the business people, but we connect to the marketing people, that how they want user to be interacted with the product, and how they want to carry that emotion with the product when we those specific user interaction happens. And ultimately the front end devs, which is going to build and work upon those specific UI elements and those specific user experiences. Do expect a pushback. So when you first going to sell the idea that we need a design system, there would be a lot of pushback from stakeholders, because see, what they come to a conclusion is that the resources which you are going to use to build the design system, they could be helping and shipping features which we are on higher priority. So this questions bother me a lot, that when I have a little bit of a good understanding that how it's supposed to be, and when we present those specific solutions, there are a lot of pushback coming from various teams, and I can completely understand that a scenario, because everybody comes from a different background, everybody have a different priority, and everybody is having a different way of thinking that how that problem can be solved. So I have put it some of the tips around that how can pretty much go through your specific investigation and pretty much gather as much as information which is possible, and then you can present those information and then have that particular things in an agreement. And so gather data as much as possible. You can use your project management tool to actually gather more information. The points you need to gather about is design is inconsistency. Look towards your project, that what part of your project look inconsistent, and how much that particular variation is there, and how frequently that inconsistency is there. Also look for duplicate efforts, like one team is work upon one particular component, then other team is also built the same, and some other team builds the same. Maybe it's a very small one or very big one, doesn't matter, just look for those duplicate efforts. And if you have a project management tool, and if you have that particular tool in your disposal, use them, and you'll definitely find something useful over there. You also look for efficiency metrics, like you just cater everything, that if you have some specific scale of team and some specific scale of product, how efficient your designers are, how efficient your development people are, and how efficient your QA is, based on the data they have, based on the stories, based on the data they have with them. So when you gather all those data, the next step what you should do is you need to build advocates. So first start with your small team, and then spread it to other teams as well. Share the data which you have gathered, and also the design system success stories. You can search for various companies who have been who have started and developed and built their own design system. Learn about the regions for it, learn about the problem they were facing earlier which they have solved, compile those success stories and share within the team. And once you do that, and with the data which you have gathered from your project management tool, building advocates would be easy. I'm also giving you some talking points for dev, what's important to them and how to tackle to those particular parts. So for the developers, the important things are how we can reduce the time to figuring out that what UI to use. I mean, there are a lot of front-end frameworks, there are a lot of front-end libraries. Picking one is really challenging, and there are a lot of things which we miss out when we go with one another, and everybody have a completely different opinion that about one to another. So if we reduce that time, that what UI to use, and make that decision making faster, that would be one thing which gonna help our specific front end dev pretty much. Second thing, they pretty much care about that how much refactor happening within their code. Like one particular time, one feature request came from the product or maybe from business, we worked upon it. Later on, we see a different variation or different version of that same requirement, but now we end up having to refactor the existing code because that bigger picture were not there initially. So how much time we can reduce of the of those particular incidents. Similarly, when we talk about implementation, we talk about how consistent it's supposed to be and how inconsistent we are writing from one team to another. I mean, in React, it's very much possible to have the fragmentation because there is no defined guidelines that how your page is supposed to go, how your directory structure supposed to be. So every team pretty much writes the React the way they want. And when you talk about consistency, that's not very much available specifically in React projects because there is no CLI and there is no a proper tooling around it. So people end up having and creating their own way of implementation. To help them about those specific points, you can show them that how using components can make their life easier, like just create a prototype, do sandboxing, maybe use material design as a very base of your system, maybe use ant design as a base of your system, and just build on top of it something and show them that okay, if you build have to build this calendar component from scratch, or maybe taking this base code from here and then putting the style up on top of it, and then keeping this calendar component for every specific place where we need a calendar for that particular UI, and that will be in the sync of the designer and product and marketing people. Then this is going to add a real value inside their specific development effort. Also point out the inconsistencies they have in their product, like multiple shades of the same color, or multiple variation of the font they are using, or maybe the naming convention they are going with, and stuff like that. I also have some of the talking points for business. So business generally care about either they need to make money or save money, and also the second thing they care most about is the how you can improve the customer experience. So to talk to them, you need to wear a different shoe altogether, and there where these talking points comes in, you need to show them the areas where app is inconsistent, like you did with the front end engineers. And you also show them that how much hour you have spent rewriting all those logic and the UI when a particular requirement changes from A to maybe A plus minus. And also you show them that how cost changes with the scale, like when you are having three people in your team, the cost of development, and when you have suppose 50 people of your team, how that cost of development scales exponentially. Those specific changes you need to find out. Also show them the byproducts of building design system, that what the end result's going to look like. Show them the tools and technology available so far. Show them that what can be achieved. Also share them the success stories and other data you have gathered from your product management team. uh, Define some ground rules for designers as well. So I completely understand the designer needs to be creative, but that creativity should not harm the product development and should not increase a lot of duplicate work on a front end engineering. So we need to define some ground rules for them, that if we are creating a boundary in terms of design for ourselves, here is the boundary which you can be pretty much restricted towards that. I would not say that force them to adhere to those specific boundaries, but just communicate. And I think that communication needs to be very clear, that if you go through these specific guidelines and if your creativity is restricted to that particular portion of the boundary, then the time required to develop and build these applications would be faster compared to if you're going beyond those boundaries and then we have to put extra effort on this. But yeah, rework would not be there, and other part of benefits you can usually talk through them. Building a design system, I found it somewhere while writing, reading a lot of books around it, and I think it's a good idea to share. So it seems like it has these four stages. The seed stage is very starting, where you identify that you have a desire which you want to increase efficiency at scale, and if you want, and the design system is going to solve that particular problem. When you see that desire inside your team and inside your stakeholder, then you start thinking in the direction where a design system would make sense, and then you start building on top of it. The next thing you do is you start to do discovery and research, which means you collaborate with all the stakeholders and try to understand the whole scope of the system you're going to create. The activity you do in discovery phase is you do UX audits, try to figure out those inconsistencies in your UI and UX, and you explore existing interaction and pain points from various stakeholders like users and marketing people, product people, designers, and so. You also speak to the users and also list down their challenges, the end user of your application, just to understand that either the color is too bright for them, or either some specific part of the UI which don't make any sense, and some specific part of the UI they're not able to explore because of they don't know how to do that and stuff like that. So the and then you also need to have an understanding of the business goals of your company. Then you also determine the criteria and how you're going to measure the success of your design system. So that's the activity you do in your discovery phase. Then you come to the framing phase. The framing phase is a more of a conversion stuff, where you start building on top of your scope. You define priority, you have a strategy and technology decided that how you're going to achieve those specific goals, and you move forward with it. The activity which you do in framing is you explore technology stack and tooling around it. You evaluate the overall complexity, timeline, scope, and resources you need. You start fixing the design principles, that what sort of like design principle you'll be needing, and you start creating epics and also prioritize them the way you want to pretty much deliver and build upon. And you also build a strategy for adoption, which is very important. Like, adoption is something you build something but people are not using it, and that doesn't make sense. You also need to build a strategy around it, that how easy it's going to be for people to use, and how you're gonna cater those specific challenges which you when user going to onboard you will be facing. So those specific things you need to plan ahead of the time. Then in the solution part, you start building and continue to test your design in very first product and team. The activities which you can plan into this is you start building your design system. That's the first thing. You create goals and anti-goals. So goals are that what you're going to deliver in this particular release, and anti-goals are which you are going to deprioritize and not release into this particular particular release cycle. So that's your goals and anti-goals. You also identify your risk areas, that if you are going with these particular stories or these particular goals, how much risk they contain, how much time and effort they contains, do we have the ability, resource, and stuff like that. And identify those areas. If somebody is going on a very long leave, and if you plan them into your specific design, your specific goal, then that's a risk that kind of risk you have to calibrate. And then you also need to have some mechanism to collect usability feedback when people are start going to using it. You need to have a particular way of system so that they can give you feedback, either through bugs or either through feature requests and stuff like that. And then you roll out your design system to a team or a product. Start very small. I mean, don't try to get everybody on board at once. Go on a very small and baby step, what we call here, and um, try to experiment with one particular team or one very small portion of their app, or maybe a complete app, depending on how big it is. Then also you need to build a process to capture bug and contributions. So the best idea to do this is just put everything available internal GitHub repo or internal whatever Git standard you're using, Git software you're using, and allow them it to be public so that anybody can see it, anybody can raise a bug, and anybody can post a PR over there. And solution have this continuous effort. Solution is not going to end over there. Solution is something which you're going to reiterate and rebuild every time you find those feedbacks and stuff like that. So on the next iteration of the solution, what you need to do is you need to solve more challenges for scale and adoption, while continuing to test the existing assumptions which you had. So the activities here is you need to identify new challenges which you're facing. You need to redefine the goals and increase adoption. So adoption would be your first priority here. And you also reorganize the team to spread out the knowledge. So the idea here is to not build the knowledge silos, that these are the three people who are experts in design system which we have created. Instead of having that, you need to spread that information into multiple teams. So reshuffle and reorganize your team which is working on the design system to some specific time duration. Secure and tighten that feedback loop. So whatever feedback mechanism you have created, you need to secure that and tighten it even further, so that the idea of sharing you the feedback and the idea of coming the feedback to you is become a little bit easy and a little bit any fail proofing over there. So that's how you should start thinking about the design system and start building one. And this one is something which I learned after we did that activity in Naukri, and sort of all other those specific aspect to it. So first thing is like, you should be open to contributions. So don't treat your design system as something you own. Treat your design system at it's a collaborative effort. Everybody needs to collaborate to make it successful. So open to contribution, open those PRs so that anybody can open it and stuff like that. Collect ownership, have a process of PR and bugs, and make your backlog accessible. If you have a project management tool where you are maintaining this design system as a project, you should also make your backlog public so that people can see that what sort of things you have planned and what sort of things is already there and how you planned that, and if they can help in and contribute in those specific stories. Reduce the maintenance cost. Try to simplify the approach you have taken. Don't over engineer or over design. So when I have started working on my design system, I wanted everything very perfect, and things are not called perfect in a space which we are in. So I think I pretty much tend to overthink and over engineer a lot of stuff which fails at certain point of time. So the idea is to keep it simple. If everybody can understand it, if everybody can be comfortable using and working on it, then it's gonna be a successful one. Otherwise, no matter how good a system you can build, if somebody is if the team is not able to understand it, they will not be comfortable using it. And then invest in tooling and automation. So most of the time, tooling and automation helps a lot when we talk about adoption, when we talk about upgrade and migration and those specific aspect to it. So pretty much do those specific part. Collaborate is it's something very similar to being the open to contribution, but this is more of a team perspective instead of a code instead of technical perspective. That let the team make their own decision, let the team make their own specific stuff. Your design system should not be a blocker for any team, and allow as much as snowflakes they can throw upon you. You need to be very good at documentation, provide examples, provide counter examples, and keep the documents up to date, and also help others to come and collaborate you with the documentation as well. Release process, you need to have a robust release process for this. You need to have ensure that your releases are backward compatible, and if not, that clearly mention in your release details. Automate your build release process cycle using CI and CD, and send out release details to every specific channels available in your company, so everybody knows that you have released something new and people can look at it. You also develop a feedback loop, which I think we have already talked a lot. So it's it's something similar to that. Informants, the patterns and the guidelines and the other things that you have created as a part of your design system. You need to make sure that people are adhering to those, and if they are not, you need to find a pretty much a way and work around those specific things. You need a process to actually moderate the individual stuff going on by using that particular design system. Make use of open source. So if you think that you can build everything from scratch, uh, that's pretty much good. But when you start building those specific design system, what you need to do is you need to find out something which is which is very basic and very bare bone. Strip out the styles and put your styles over there. This is I'm talking about in context of your visual library or component library which you're going to build. So those specific components, rather starting them from scratch and building it completely for you, pick those specific components which are available. On a React side, this RC component library, like RC date, RC date picker and stuff like that, those are very good. They're very bare bone. They don't have that much style and that much complexity to it. You can pick them and pretty much start building on top of it. Here are some resources which we have either discussed or we have pretty much again. So atomic design is something where you can just learn that how the atomic design and stuff work. Material design is to get you an idea that how component libraries and other things to stuff. And ant design is another pattern library where you can go to those parts. Any questions you have? Any? You're on mute. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ashok. We are out of time.
Yeah, I know that.
Like around
It's
12 minutes, I guess. So thank you for the design system talk, and it was really a great talk, I would have to say. So to contact for the further information, you have a Twitter handle that you guys can contact Ashok for the further information. Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everyone, and thanks for having me. I'll also be available on Q&A session, so if you have some sort of questions, just be prepared for that. And thanks a lot, and thanks Geekly to putting this up. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Bye.